This one now. Welcome, brothers and sisters, to the second annual conference of the LDS Educators Association. I'm A. LeGrand Richards, not the LeGrand Richards, but he's my grandpa, and they call me Buddy around here most often, and that's comfortable for me to be. We are so thrilled that you're here. This organization, it's its second year. The first year was really kind of an experiment to see what the interest would be in establishing that, and we have since been adopted by the Alumni Association, and so we're probably going to have to change our name, but we'll keep you posted on that, on how that will do. We want it to be as inclusive as we can make it. For those who are teachers in all types of settings, we know that we have some of you who are in public school settings. We know that some are in higher ed. We know we have some in the church educational system in one form or another, the pathway program, and we're grateful for all of your participants. And we know there's some of you that just want to improve your teaching skills and become more effective in the things that you're doing in your callings. So we're thrilled to be able to sponsor this particular group. We have a lineup that's just stellar. I'm so thrilled to be that we've had such a wonderful reception of those who will be participating. We've received numerous requests to reach out to Latter-day Saint educators in various states, and even several countries have said, we want a chapter in Mexico, and we want to do something in England. And we know that there is a great challenge that folks would like to do it. We'll grow as we can. We want to make sure that we do it in the proper kind of way, and we stay true to the principles that we hold to be part of this. We have board members that are here. Why don't you stand up for just a minute? We won't introduce everyone, but recognize these faces. If we've got some others that are part of this. If you've got particular insights or things you'd like to share with us, feel free to grab one of these folks and twist their arm a little bit to give them your suggestions. We hope that next year, we're hoping that we can actually do a call for proposals. Those that might like to make presentations, we'll have a committee that will review those. I'm not sure how many of those will actually be accepted, but we'd like to open that up. We know that the Religious Studies Center sponsors a magazine entitled The Religious Educator, and they've committed to put one of their volumes specifically for our group, publish articles that would be appropriate for our interests. If we get enough interest in that direction and enough insights into it, they'd actually have volunteered to be helpful to help us create our own journal if we would like to do that. So we have we're separating both the conference and the membership this year. We're not charging anything. We think we can handle it at least this year without dues, but hopefully we'll have a website up that we can have some of the videotapes of those presentations that are done today be available. I know it, as I looked at it, I thought, well, how can I split myself into 4 ways so I can go to everything but at the same time? That's not so we can hopefully we'll have those available for you. And we'll see how this grows. We want to make sure we stay true to the moorings that we have here. The special thanks ought to go to our board members for their efforts in organizing. And a particular Michelle Price. Michelle, are you here? Stand up. She's been so helpful in organizing this. She's our department secretary, and we also have a student assistant. I think she's out at the desk. Camille, are you out? Camille, are you in this group? She's also been helpful for this. We have in the Alumni Association, Christina Southam and the folks here at the front desk have been very helpful in getting us going. So we're thrilled to have it. A couple of changes that you want to be alerted to. When we have the assembly hall upstairs, the third floor, those classes will actually now be moved to the south end of this assembly hall. So if you come out the doors around the other side, we've divided this assembly hall into two parts. So those that were going to be upstairs will be there. So we were going to have lunch outside, and we have it all set up for that, but between the heat and the smoke, we thought maybe it would be better for us to move it upstairs, so we'll hold the luncheon upstairs, if that makes sense to you. The other room, that the northeast conference room, I think, is where the other breakout session is. It's just down the hall to the right. So we'll all be on this floor. During the whole session, we also have a note of the Education in Zion exhibit, and we've got a little placard out in the hallway that says, if you'd like to meet, they will take, on an hourly basis, they'll bring some folks over, and if you wanted to take a tour of the Education in Zion exhibit, and they'd be happy to escort you there. It's in the Joseph F. Smith building, which is the other part of campus. So we have those 4 breakout sessions going continuously, and we hope that you feel free to go to any of those that we've got. And that should clear up those kind of details. If you have questions, grab one of us, and we're happy to try to help answer those. This year's theme, we selected from actually the title that Brother Bowles gave us last year. We adapted a little bit to say, feed the shepherds and lead the sheep. We thought that was an appropriate title. We hope to, because it stands so much for the mission of what we hope we'll be doing as an institution. We hope to strengthen those who teach in any capacity. Teaching is such a wonderful and challenging opportunity to bless the lives of our Heavenly Father's children. As I think about the particular theme, it says, after his resurrection, the Lord appeared to his apostles who'd been fishing all night without success. He told them to cast their nets on the other side of the boat in waters where normally there were few, if any, fish. Following his simple instruction, their nets were filled to overflowing. That's a great lesson for all of us who would want to teach in whatever capacity. With his help, the Lord's help, our efforts may also have miraculous results. As the apostles were marveling over the catch they'd had, Jesus asked Peter 3 different times, lovest thou me more than these? His reply, yea, Lord, I love thee, repeated 3 times. To each of these, the questions, Jesus charged Peter to feed my sheep. I love the Luther translation of that particular passage, where he writes, it's written, Vita meine Schafe. If we were to translate that one, that it would really be translated as, lead my sheep to the pasture where they can be nourished. Now that's, of course, the way you would feed the sheep in those days. But note that they must do their own eating. We aren't called to shove food into their mouths or lock their heads in the feeder, but to put them in the pasture where they can eat. Not everything that sheep will eat would be nourishing. So this wonderful injunction entails at least 2 important parts to the shepherd. He or she must know what food is truly nourishing, and then how to lead the sheep in such a way that they will choose to go there to eat it. I think that's a wonderful message for us. So our task today, we've gathered to assemble a remarkable collection of shepherds to share with us the ways in which we might most effectively lead the sheep that are entrusted to us. You have a copy of the program. We have the setup in that way. We'll proceed in that way. And we want to start with an opening prayer. I've asked David Boren if he'd come up and offer that. And then I will introduce our first speaker.
Our Father in heaven, we come before Thee this morning with gratitude in our hearts to meet as disciples and as educators. We are so grateful for the facilities and sacrifices that have been made for us to be able to be here in this beautiful building. We ask that thy Spirit will be here this day. Please guide those that will be speaking and teaching, as well as those of us that will be listening and learning, that we will rejoice and be edified together, and that we'll learn some things and feel some things that will help us in our work with thy children, that we can better know how to serve them. We love thee and ask thee to please bless our families while we're away from them, and bless all those that we will work with in the future, that we'll be able to touch their hearts. We love thee and say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. David is our president-elect, and he'll be running this next year, so we're thrilled to have him. Our first speaker today is Brad Wilcox. I don't know that he needs any real introduction. I think it's important for us to recognize that he started out as an elementary school teacher, and what a thrill that is. Now he teaches, he was in our teacher ed program for many years, and now teaching as an associate professor in ancient scripture at BYU. He served as a member of the General Sunday School General Board, and is a dear friend. He's written lots of books, and there's such demand that working in his schedule is not an easy thing to do. But without further ado, I introduce to you Brad Wilcox.
Thanks, buddy.
I think this is the best one in the room.
Thanks. So this is the mic that's working, or both of them are. Okay, because if I'm hooked up here, are you getting me? So do I need this one? Okay, then I'll just use this one. Or is this one not on? Let's try that again. There. Well, it's wonderful to be with you. I look out and I see so many faces of so many friends that I feel like I'm not in a conference. I feel like I'm in a family reunion. And so who brought the potato salad? That's all I'm wondering. It's great to be with you. I appreciate your dedication to being an educator, and I am grateful to be counted as one of this group. And I'm excited to think that the conference has doubled in size since last year, and I'm excited to think about the future and realize how many lives can be touched as we unite as LDS educators. I grew up in Ethiopia, Africa. Nobody ever believes me. When I used to tell my students my little sixth graders, that I lived in Ethiopia, they'd say, "No way." And I'd say, "Yes, that's where I grew up." "No, no, no." I said, "Why don't you believe me?" They said, "You're not skinny enough to be from Ethiopia." All they'd ever heard about were starving children, and I didn't look like I was starving, and so they didn't believe me. But I actually did grow up there. My earliest childhood memories are all of Africa. My dad was there with a USAID grant, and they assembled a team of educators from BYU, from Utah State University, from BYU, Idaho, and they went over to try to start a teacher education program, something that had never been done in that country before. So my father spent many years trying to get a little teacher training program off the ground to improve education in Ethiopia and throughout that region. Well, at the time I wasn't really aware of what my father was doing, but I was just living my life as a child in that country. And because those are my earliest memories, one thing that sank deep was the value of education. Many children in America grow up and all they hear about is, "Oh, I hate school, I hate school." I grew up in a country where school was a blessing and a privilege, and where I realized very early that this was something that was valuable, and I could see the difference that education made in the lives of people. And so that was imprinted on me very early. We moved back to the United States when I was in about 3rd grade. And my mom says I came home from school the first day crying. Now, I don't remember this, but my mom said that I was crying, and she said, "What's wrong?" And I said, "Mom, everybody's white." I had gone from black Africa to white Provo, and it was a little cultural transition for me. But I grew up in Provo, and my mom started teaching school. She had graduated from art here at BYU and then went back to get her education to become a teacher, and she started teaching 2nd grade at Provost Elementary School. She would draft my brothers and me into helping her get her classroom ready, helping her tutor her students, helping her come down. We'd go down and volunteer to help with field trips. I mean, whatever she had going on, she drafted all of the boys into helping out. Well, when the teachers at my school found out that I knew how to do bulletin board borders, I was the most popular kid in the school. Every teacher wanted me to come and help him or her with bulletin boards. So I'd spend most of my lunch recesses doing bulletin boards. I'm the only person in the history of the world who was a 4th grader, and I had a bulletin board file. I had a file full of bulletin board ideas, and I was in 4th grade. So you kind of get the idea that I was headed toward a career in education. Well, when I got to high school, I kind of liked everything. I was involved with student government, I was involved with plays, I was involved with English, I was involved with music, I was involved with history. I loved everything. I was even the mascot at Provo High School. I was the bulldog. I'm the one that had the bulldog head on, and I couldn't see a thing, but I'd just cheer whenever the cheerleaders were cheering, and I'd jump around. And so I loved everything. Well, then I wondered what I would do in the future, and I took an aptitude test at my high school, and it said I should be a priest or a rabbi. And that's not good news for a little Mormon kid. So instead I went on a mission, and I served my mission down in Chile, and once again I realized the value of education. I realized the importance of what so many people in the United States take for granted. I realized the value of literacy, and it was imprinted on me. Well, I came back, and I was here at BYU, and I still loved everything. Every class I took became my favorite class. Every class I took. And so I was bouncing from one subject to another and one major to another. One minute I was majoring in journalism. The next minute I was majoring in English. The next minute I was majoring in history. The next minute I was majoring in music. I was all over the place. And my dad finally said, "Brad, you need to take one of those career exploration classes." I said, "Dad, those are for the people who don't know what they're doing." And he said, "You ought to take one of those career exploration classes." And so I did, and they said, "We're going to do an aptitude test." And I said, "Well, I already know what it's going to say. It's going to say I should be a priest or a rabbi." And they said, "Well, this is BYU. We took that one off." So I thought, well, what's next on the list? And I took the test, and it said I should be an elementary school teacher. And I was walking out of the Kimball Tower down to the Richards building on those stairs, and I kept thinking, why did it say that? Why did it say that? And then all of a sudden I went, whoa, why not? That would be awesome. I already have the bulletin board file. I'm ahead of the game. And so I dove into elementary education, and I just never looked back. I loved it. I loved being a part of education. I think it was in the middle of a class on computers and education. Now, if you're shocked that there was such a class at BYU, there actually was a class that was called Beginning Typewriting. My children laugh because that was my lowest grade at BYU, beginning typewriting. But I was in a computers in education class, and we were learning how to use, now this is going to ring a bell for some of you, WordStar, an early word processor, and that didn't show you anything, and you had to put the commands in, and then you wouldn't see what it was going to do until it printed out. How many know what I'm talking about? Okay. I was learning how to use WordStar, and as I was getting frustrated with all of that, I thought, this isn't what I went into education for. I didn't go into education to learn how to do a word processor. This is not why I'm here. And I was complaining to my mother, and she passed me a book. The book was called The Gentle Touch by Ardith Cap. And as I read that book and heard her share her experiences as a teacher, an elementary school teacher, that's when I said, this is what I went into this for. This is why I went into education. And her book filled me with heart and hope that somehow all these academic classes I was taking were going to help me be able to become the kind of teacher that she described as she shared her experiences in that book. So thank you very much, Ardith. So then I finally ended up teaching elementary school here in Provo, Utah, and I found that I loved it. I taught it at Edgemont. I attended Grandview, and they tore that school down, and taught at Edgemont, they just tore that school down, so I don't know, I went to Provo High too, so heaven only knows what's going to happen to that one. But I started teaching 6th grade, and I found that I had just fallen into exactly what I wanted, exactly what I needed. I just loved it. I loved teaching. I loved being able to be with children. I loved being able to have a profession where I could make decisions. I loved feeling like I could make a difference. Now, there are two types of people in the world. Those who say, I love children and never work with children, and those who say, I love children and work with children. And the difference is, everybody thinks that working with children means that you're Maria von Trapp running across the mountains with little kids singing behind you, and they kind of think that that's what teaching is about. But anybody involved with children realizes that it's a lot of ups and it's a lot of downs. The first year that I taught school, I'd go home every day and I'd say to my wife, when does this even out? When do every day is like a roller coaster. It's like 1 minute I'm like, whoa, yeah. The next minute I'm down here. The next minute I'm all happy. The next minute I'm mad at them. The next minute every day was just like, 1 minute I'm loving the kids. 1 minute I want to just rake them over the coals. I was just so up and down, and I said to my wife, when does this even out? Now, my wife is a nurse, and she said, Brad, she says, when they hook you up to a heart monitor, you don't want a straight line. She said, that's kind of the bad news. You want an up and down line. And I realized that that's what education was giving me. I didn't wake up and have a good day. No, every day was up and down, but that's what let me know that I was alive. And that's what let me know that I was participating and not observing. That's what let me know that I was engaged and that I was learning and growing. And that's what I found in education. Yes, I love being with the kids, not because they're always fun, but because they're always funny. They have such a perspective on life and on the world that every day I was seeing things in a new way. I remember one kid who stood up to give his little oral report on Abraham Lincoln, and he was so nervous, he was just shaking, and he stood there with his little cards and he said, Abraham Lincoln was born in a log cabin he built with his own hands. And I just started laughing. And the funny thing wasn't just what he said. The funny thing is that none of the 6th graders got it. I mean, they're all looking at me like, "What, Mr. Wilcox, what? What's so funny?" And I'm just like, woo! I love being with children. One kid came to school late, and I'm not talking like 15 minutes late. I'm talking like, half a day late. I said, "Where have you been?" He said, "I'm sorry, Mr. Wilcox, but this morning I got this thing stuck in my nose, and I couldn't get it out. And so my mom took me to the emergency room, and they finally got it out, but they didn't know whether they got everything, so they took an x-ray of my head, but there's nothing there." You just gotta love the perspective that comes with working with kids. I went to pick my own son, my youngest son, David, when he was at school. He was in about 1st grade. And I went to pick him up at school, and the teacher was waiting for me outside. Now that's not a good sign. So I thought, oh no, what did he do? And the teacher said, "You need to know what David said in class today." And I said, "No, I don't really want to know what David said." She says, "No, you need to hear this." They were having their character quote for the day. And the character quote was, "It's nice to be important, but it's more important to be nice." So the teacher says to the children, talking about what that means, she says, "Who's an important person?" And some kids said, "The president." Now the president at the time was Bill Clinton. "The president's an important person." And she said, "Yes, and so it's also important that he's nice." "Well, then my kid, my son, says he's not nice." Now the teacher's trying to keep a lid on this, and she says, "David, why would you say that about our president?" And David says, "Because he sleeps with another woman, and it's not even his own mom." So yes, children have a unique perspective. They see things very differently. And I love that freshness. I love the authenticness of teaching youth, teaching children, because it's always real. It may not be real fun, but it's always real. And it's enriching. I loved being in education because it gave me a chance to have a profession. A lot of people say educators are middle managers, that we just implement decisions that are made at higher levels. But anyone in this room knows that the minute you're with those students, you are in charge. You're in charge. You're the one who needs to see needs, and you're the one who meets those needs. Even when they don't show up on the standardized test, even when they don't show up in the Common Core curriculum, you still see needs, and you need to meet those needs. And sometimes those needs, there's not even a textbook or a handbook or a guidebook to help you. Suddenly you're just having to meet needs, and the needs that are very real, not just academic needs for children, but all the other needs that are just screaming as educators become some of the few stable adults in their lives. Where does it say, where does it say in the state core curriculum, where does it say how you handle a little kid who is coming to school late and hungry because dad's in prison and mom has a different boyfriend sleeping over every night? There's nothing that says how to handle that. How do you handle it when a little kid is so scared that he's wetting himself in 6th grade because he's terrified that his father may come back into his life? I mean, those are needs. And I was able to sense them, to meet them. And that's what made me so grateful to be an educator, to be a professional. Not standing there on an assembly line doing the same thing every day, every year, over and over. Everybody thinks, oh, once you've taught 1 year, then it's easy, because then you just do the same thing every year after that. I see everybody in this room saying no, because the kids change, stuff change, everything changes. I have yet to teach the same class the same way over and over again. Every time I teach it, it's different because I'm learning new things. I'm trying new things. And kids have different needs. But that's what invigorated me about being in education. And I also wanted to have a career where I felt like I could make a difference. And teaching has helped me do that. I know that to me, that was vital. Maybe it's because I grew up with a mom who was a teacher and a dad who was a teacher, but I wanted to make a difference. Now, when I was declaring elementary education as a major, a lot of my friends thought that that was hysterical. They just could not understand why I would choose a career that was, you know, where I would be making so little money that my children qualified for free lunch. I mean, the minute I graduated from college, my children qualified for free lunch. So they thought that was so funny that I would devote myself to that. But now the tables have turned. You know, now tonight I attend my 40th school reunion, my 40th reunion from graduating. And now the tables have turned. Because all the friends that used to laugh at me for choosing elementary ed as a career, they're all now having their little midlife crises. And they have no meaning in their life. I have no meaning in my life. Oh, yeah, they've got their multi-million-dollar mansions and their fast cars, but they have no meaning in their life. So they're changing everything. They're changing careers, changing jobs, changing marriages, changing religions, because they've got to have meaning in their life. Well, I don't have a multi-million-dollar mansion or a fast car, but I got meaning in my life. In fact, what I pray for is a little less meaning in my life. I mean, I would like just to have one day where everything I do and say does not have eternal implications in the lives of thousands of people. Just one day. Just one free day. That's all I want. So while they're searching for meaning, I was smart enough to choose a focus that would allow me that sense of meaning. I mean, they are like, oh, some guy says to me, if I died tomorrow, no one would even notice. And I thought, oh my gosh, if I died tomorrow, my department chair would kill me. I mean, oh no, we have to get subs for his classes. Oh no, we have to, oh, who's gonna? I mean, people would know. And I'm grateful for that difference that teachers can make. So I guess, ultimately, I come back to a quote from Carl G. Mazur that I found in Buddy's wonderful book, and very inspiring book on his life as an educator. And Carl G. Mazur said, a true teacher is a teacher because he cannot help being one. And that's what I am. I'm a teacher because I can't help it. This is a poem called The Answering Machine. It says, she sat on the edge of a one-woman king-sized bed and wondered if she could face another day. 27 years in the classroom. She tried not to think about it. She tried not to remember her first-year teacher dreams. Dreams she had saved like the petals of a prom corsage. But now her tomorrows were heartbeats in a restless sleep, and dreams didn't matter anymore. So with a sigh that no one else could hear, she readied pad and pencil and pressed the playback button on her answering machine. Hello, Mrs. Stevenson? This is Charlie McWhite. You probably don't remember me, but you taught me in 2nd grade. I was the kid who still couldn't read. Well, I was thinking about you last night as I was reading Brown Bear to my little girl, and it was strange. It was me saying the words, but I kept hearing your voice in my head. All these years, and your voice is still in my head. Well, I hope I didn't bother you, but I just called to say that you were right. I did learn to read. I did go to college. I did just fine. And I guess I just want to say thank you. Thanks for everything. goodbye, she sat on the edge of a one-woman king-sized bed, put pad and pencil down, and smiled. 27 years in the classroom. Children, children, what do you see? I see a teacher looking at me. Yes, teachers can make a difference, but we're gathered today as LDS educators. Any teacher out there can make professional decisions. Any teacher out there can enjoy being with children and youth. Any teacher out there can make a difference. So what makes us unique? As I've thought about this, I think it boils down to perspective. As Latter-day Saint teachers, we bring a perspective that sets us apart, that sets our efforts apart, that sets our work apart. We bring a perspective that allows us to see the Spirit differently. We bring a perspective that allows us to see the people we're working with differently. And we bring a perspective that allows us to see education differently than other educators. First of all, the Spirit. Do you realize I read an article once? I think I was just amazed because the whole article was talking about how researchers were trying to identify why some classrooms click and why other classrooms don't click, even when they're using the same material, the same basal program. Why does it work in some classes and not in other classes? And after the whole research project was done, they boiled it down to what they called the bibbidi-bobbidi-boo factor. Oh, that's scientific. The bibbidi-bobbidi-boo factor. And I thought, how sad that there are so many educators out there in the world who don't know how to describe the Spirit. They just have to call it the bibbidi-bobbidi-boo factor. But as Latter-day Saints, we know what the Spirit is, and we know that it is the Spirit that teaches. So while many teachers are out there talking about how the light goes on, LDS educators are talking about when the light goes in. We have a different perspective of the Spirit. We also have a different perspective about the children and the young adults and the people that we are working with. We see them differently. My calling in church for 5 years was taking care of an autistic boy and getting him through the 3-hour block. Little did I know that calling, which some days I hated, was actually preparing me for my own autistic grandson that I can't say goodbye to after the 3-hour block. I discuss the issue of autism often with my daughter, who's this boy's mother, and we find ourselves reading a lot about autism. We find ourselves anxious to learn about it. We find ourselves very worn out at times, trying to keep up with this kid who keeps us all going, just trying to keep a lid on him. And my daughter read an article that said Utah has an extremely high percentage of autistic kids. So we were musing about that. What is it about Utah that would have so many more autistic kids than other states? And somebody was saying, well, maybe it's polygamy. And then somebody else was saying, well, maybe it's the water, we put chlorine in it or something. And everybody's given their little perspectives. And then my daughter says, maybe it's because Heavenly Father knows that here, those kids will still be valued. They will still be seen as children of God, as individuals, and that they will be looked at as children who can still make a contribution, children who can teach us something, and not just children who have to be cared for throughout a meaningless life. She says, maybe that's why Utah has so many. Now, I don't know if that could be shown to be true in a study, but when my daughter said those words, the Spirit testified of truth in my heart. And I realized that we do, as LDS educators, we see people differently because we see them in an eternal perspective. We see mortality and our bodies and our handicaps in an eternal perspective, and that sets us apart. Well, ultimately, we see education differently as LDS educators. We see the act of education itself differently. Most people in the world see education as a hoop you have to jump to make a living. But we see education as enriching our lives at any age, at any stage. Years ago, some of you might remember that they would announce in the graduation, the oldest faculty member, or not faculty member, sorry. Can you imagine? The oldest geezer out here is, no, they'd announce the oldest graduate and the youngest graduate. Does anybody remember those days? And I was always fascinated, here's our youngest graduate who's 16, and you're like, what? And then they'd say, here's our oldest graduate. And one year they announced that the oldest graduate was 86 years old. And I thought, what on earth is an 86-year-old woman doing getting a college degree? What, she wants to climb the corporate ladder? She wants better retirement benefits? No, she just wants what all of us want, to have her life enriched. And that's the way Mormons see education. I know of no other religion in the world that has something called Education Week. An entire week where 30,000 people flood this campus and they don't get credit for it, they don't get grades for it, they don't have to pass a test for it, there's no set curriculum that they have to cover. I've never seen anything like it. But Latter-day Saints come and they stay in those classes from sunup till sundown. Why? Because it's fun, they say. It's fun. It's fun. Do you see how we see education differently? Mormons have more books in their homes than non-Mormons. How many know what I'm talking about? Yeah, Mormons have more musical instruments in their homes than non-Mormons. How many know what I'm talking about? Mormons take more music lessons than non-Mormons. How many know what I'm talking about? Those are true. They've actually done studies and shown that that's the case. Mormons just view education, it's part of our culture, and it has been from the very beginning. Ever since Adam and Eve wisely chose to partake of the tree of knowledge, then Mormons have been making that choice ever since. I was fascinated in my graduate studies at University of Wyoming to have a teacher come to me and show me a textbook that listed Joseph Smith Jr. as the founder of adult education programs in the United States. Maybe you didn't realize that. Because of a little school in Kirtland, Ohio, what was it called? School of the Prophets. They cannot document a school earlier than that school that was for grown-ups. It wasn't for children, it wasn't for teens, it was for grown-ups. And they didn't just talk church, they talked philosophy, they talked history, they talked cultures, they talked languages. It was for women, ultimately, as well as for men. And that is the first school that they can document that was for adults. Why would adults need to learn? Kids need to learn to prepare to be adults, but why would adults need to learn? It was Joseph Smith Jr., the man we revere as a prophet, that they recognize as the founder of adult education. We see it differently. We see it differently than they do. And Brigham Young picked up where Joseph Smith left off. They came west. He said, bring seeds, bring tools, bring anything we need for surviving. Bring books. Oh, seriously? Yeah, that's what I want to haul across the plains in my handcart. Don't forget the encyclopedia set, Mildred. I mean, can you imagine? Bring books. And bless those saints' hearts, they obeyed. And into their wagons, into their handcarts, into their satchels, they brought books. One article that I read said that in the time when the pioneers were first arriving, Utah had more books in it than California. Nobody went to California to learn. Nobody went to California to go to school. Nobody valued books as people rushed for gold. The books were in Utah. And that's where the schools were. You know, it's interesting because the saints arrived, the first group of saints arrived with Brigham Young on July 24th, 1847. Now they had to get ready for the coming winter. So you'd think school could wait. No, not for Mormons. End of July to the end of August to the end of September, and Mormons were in school, and Mormons have been in school ever since. When I went to University of Wyoming, my chair said to me, go down to the library and see if you can find this book we need for this study that we're doing. And she says, if you can't find it, get it through interlibrary loan. And I said, no, I don't need to do that. I'll just run to the next campus and get it there. She says, what next campus? I says, I don't know, there's got to be a school nearby. She says, Brad, you are at the University of Wyoming. The only university in Wyoming. See, I'd grown up in Utah. You can't spit without hitting a university. And I didn't realize that one state away, there was only one school. It reminded me of how blessed we are to have a people that see education differently. We see literacy differently. When I was on my mission in Chile as a young man, we met a lady named Ana Delgado. She was from a family of 13 children, and she was a young mother, and the way she helped contribute to her own children and her family was to act as a maid, to clean, to cook, and then the missionaries found her. And she didn't know how to read, and she certainly didn't see any need to learn to read, because how does reading help you make an empanada? And how does reading help you clean a toilet? But the minute she started learning about the church, she wanted to learn to read. She wanted to read the Book of Mormon. She wanted to read the Bible. The missionaries worked with her. Some of the local members worked with her. And she did learn to read. Then she set a goal. She said, I want all my kids to graduate from college. Now in our world, it's a very realistic goal. It's not out of reach. But in her world, at that time, well, not many people have the chance to go back to the country where they served a mission, but I did. I had the remarkable opportunity to be called as a mission president and assigned right back in the same country. And while I was there, I went and found Ana Delgado. She's still active in the church. Her husband's never joined the knothead, but she's still active in the church, and she still has a stack of books there in her house and her little reading glasses, and she's a grandmother now, but she's still reading up a storm. She has all these little church books. She's still reading up a storm. And I asked her, how did you do on your goal? She said, every one of my children graduated from college. And she says, my oldest granddaughter will be graduating next year as a medical doctor. Now you want to take all religion out of it. You want to take all spirituality out of it. You want to take all of our doctrine away. That's the Mormon church. an illiterate grandmother, to college graduate children, to a medical doctor granddaughter. That's the Mormon Church. And if you know enough about your own family history, you will see the same story. Mormons are better educated than non-Mormons. It's true in the United States, especially our Mormon women. Better educated than others from other religious groups. Mormons are better educated in Europe, in Asia, in Canada, and in Mexico, where a Latter-day Saint has a 30% chance, better chance of having an education than someone who is not a Latter-day Saint. We value education. We see the need for it, and we don't fear it the way many religions do. When I visited the Cook Islands, I talked to a bus driver, and I said, "What do you like most about living here? What do you like least about living here?" He says, "We don't have a high school, and we don't have a college, and so we have to send our children to New Zealand to get an education, and then they come home and they no longer believe in God." And he says, I don't like that. Now, he wasn't LDS, but he says, "I don't like that. I tell my children I don't want them to have an education." Now, there aren't many Latter-day Saints across the globe who are saying don't get an education. Because we have a doctrine that embraces all truth. What do Mormons believe? All truth. That's a pretty big article of faith. There's nothing that scares us. For what could anyone learn in depth that would not strengthen testimony? The fear for Mormons is not that people will read. The fear for Mormons is that people will choose not to read and not to study. "Oh, the church never told me." Since when does the church have to tell you, for Pete's sake? Read a book. What on earth could our young people ever learn in depth that would take them away from the church? The problem is they settle for a few flashy headlines on some website. They settle for some pop culture explanation, and they're not willing to dig deeply enough to find the truths that will strengthen their testimonies. I have a returned missionary who went into medical school, decided he's too smart for the church. My son is going into medical school, came out of an anatomy class here at BYU in tears, saying, "Dad, I know there's a God. I mean, just think about your eyeball. I know there's a God. Look at that." What could they learn in depth that is going to pull them away? How blessed we are to not just be educators, but to be Latter-day Saint educators, to have a different perspective of the Spirit, have a different perspective of the people we work with and the people we teach, and to have a different perspective of education itself, of its purpose, and the way it happens. I am grateful for Russ Oscathorpe, with whom I served for 5 years in the Sunday school. And I'm grateful that he was able to help so many in the church expand their vision and recognize this bigger perspective that we have. Russ, you made a difference, and we're proud of you. And I end by sharing a story that was shared by Mossy White. Now, Mossy was a school board president here in Provo, but she also had daughters who had attended my mother's classroom at Provost Elementary. You know, when we buried Mom down in the in the cemetery, Provo Cemetery. My brother was dedicating the grave and the school bell rang. And we all started busting out laughing right in the middle of the dedicatory prayer. We all just started laughing our guts out because there's Mom's school right across the street. I thought, oh my gosh, she's going to pop out of this grave and she's going to run over and supervise recess. But there she was. And Mosi White wrote this. I remember when one of my daughters was in 2nd grade, she appeared ill to me one day. And when I asked her, she denied it. I kept watching her and kept asking her repeatedly if she was feeling well, and she said she was just fine. It became so apparent to me that something was wrong that I took her to the doctor, and he informed me that she had an ear infection so bad that both of her eardrums were about to burst. When I asked my daughter why she had not told me that she was so sick, she said, "Because you would have made me stay home from school. And my teacher would have been so sad if I were not there." She says, now all 3 of my daughters have had that teacher, and when we sit and reminisce about old school days, she is always mentioned as one of the greatest teachers they had. I told this teacher that one day, and she said, oh no one remembers a 2nd grade teacher. Well, I know she's not wrong about many things, but she was wrong about that. One does remember the teacher, whether it was in kindergarten, 2nd grade, 12th grade, or in the university. The teacher who gives one the gift of knowing that one is needed, loved, and accepted for oneself. I am proud that my father made a difference as a teacher here at BYU. I'm grateful that my mother made a difference as a teacher in 2nd grade. But I'm old enough now to recognize that the thing that made the difference wasn't just that they were educators. It was that they were LDS educators. And with them, into every class they taught, they brought the Spirit. Into every class they taught, although they could not vocalize it in public school settings, they brought their testimony of Jesus Christ and of the reality of his atonement and his restored gospel. And that changed the way they viewed the Spirit, it changed the way they viewed their students, and it changed the way they viewed education. And I pray that it will do the same for us. I leave this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Amen. Oh, thanks.
We got a book.
Thank you. You ain't heard nothing yet. The rest of the day's gonna be awesome.